STC Yearbook 2. Thanks, Julian, for giving me the link to this. We start out the first story seeing Eggman putting something in a cauldron to make some kind of brown soup. Then it turns out Amoebian was conveniently right behind Eggman to spy on him, and he decides to tell Sonic about this because he assumed, just like I did, that this wasn't merely soup he was making. Good thing he assumed that. And it sure was convenient that a regular Amoebian managed to sneak into Eggman's base and find out about his evil plan. It was nice of Sonic to thank that guy for the warning. Sonic speeds off, leaving dust behind him, and Tails flies behind him, keeping up with him just fine. It's nice to see a civilian admiring Sonic. At first I was confused when Sonic said he'd spring into action because I thought he was using the idiom as normal and was referring to the fact that he was running. So when Tails said he'd rather fly, I thought he was just being stupid. But it turns out Sonic was making a pun of all things when it's not early Archie Sonic, because he was running up to a spring. I guess the reason I took until the next panel to notice the spring was because it was a boring gray color instead of red or yellow like spring should be, because it's much more charming to look at. So Sonic asked why the spring isn't springing him. Apparently he stuck to it, hence the sticky in the title of the story. This is brilliant, it's taking advantage of a concept from the game levels and using it in a creative way. And it outdoes the extra life monitor nonsense too. Now all we need is for Sonic to find a shield. I loved that it was explained that Hope can make a flame shield with her engineering skills in Archie, but it wasn't quite as charming because she didn't get out of an item monitor. Eggman reveals he stuck Sonic to the spring with glue, cleverly taking advantage of the fact that Sonic tends to always jump on springs. And it's good that the glue was brown from the start to try to disguise that it was glue better. Too bad it was still a bit obvious he'd used sticky stuff anyways because of the title, and my prior experience with the first issue of Archie, where Eggman used brown Megamux stuff to try to stop Sonic. This Eggman is much more competent right away because he actually succeeds. And I love the unexpected joke where Eggman said, "Hope no one notices the glue pot stuck to my hands." I hope this situation won't just be resolved by Deus Ex Machina. Sonic tells Tails to get him a spare pair of sneakers. It makes sense he'd keep one, he is smart. And Tails is impressively smart by not stopping to tell a civilian what happened, because after all, it is an emergency. Tails avoids some laser shooting buzz bomber and a coconut, and after Sonic somehow jumps out of the sneakers when they were glued to the spring, so jumping would have been impossible, he lands in some new sneakers. What the fuck? If he could just jump any time, why did he need new sneakers so badly? Granted, he probably needs new sneakers so he could run without damaging the environment or his feet. He does ruin normal shoes in canon. But that's not the point. He shouldn't have been able to jump out of shoes that were glued to the floor without stepping out of them first, and being in his socks. And how did he jump that high? He's not Sonic X Sonic. At least it was cool that Eggman was using the drill box from Sonic 2 because this is the only time he's ever looked smart using it. He only used it after he ensured that Sonic couldn't run away from his machine. But then he does anyways. I knew there would be a Deus Ex Machina. The stories are too short. At least he thanks Tails for the sneakers. Somehow Eggman wonders if there will be glue on the spring he's driving towards when it wasn't the same one as before. Otherwise he would know there was glue on it. And it springs his vehicle towards the edge of a cliff. How did he survive that landing? He's not a robot. Maybe that's the reason why Sonic stories and stuff like Archie STC phase out Eggman going after Sonic himself. There's no reason he should logically survive that kind of slapstick, so it's better to have other villains risk their lives, mainly robots. Otherwise every story will have a plot hole because he somehow survived. Sonic grabs rings as I take multiple reads to finally understand what he's saying when he insults Eggman in that weird way. Of all the ways to insult someone, why do it like that? And when he's not there? Somehow, Eggman's drill machine didn't in fact fall off a cliff and get destroyed, and instead flies back upwards with no explanation. I can only assume it's some kind of flying machine like the Eggmobile just in case. After all, the machines he attacks to within the games generally are the Eggmobile. This at least defied my expectations, if only because it was so unintuitive, and it managed to avert the plot hole of how did Eggman survive. Of course, after he plans to kill Tails, he fails. But no, not because Tails avoided him himself. Instead, it's because Sonic had to bail him out. I hate that Eggman called Tails TTT. I don't see how that was supposed to be funny. And somehow Eggman's drill machine gets launched upwards by what looks like an explosion. This made me assume he hit a landmine and it magically acted like a spring instead of just exploding his machine. But it's probably actually a spring because they're in a place with springs in it. I just wish Sonic didn't make a tire pun because that's early Archie Sonic's thing, and that's not Fleetway Sonic's character. It's Archie Sonic who's supposed to be making puns because he's all about being a fun, lovable, fun-loving jokester, while Fleetway Sonic was much more about being cool and arrogant, to the point where I accused him of being a creator's pet almost right away. Well, I never thought that about Archie Sonic so early. But this is technically a precursor to STC, and not actually STC canon. Instead of the drill machine falling off a cliff, it bounced off a palm tree, so Sonic ducks to avoid it, while Tails is written to make a pun in a dangerous situation and force a joke. Seriously, what is it with the earliest Sonic comics ever and puns? Oh, this is ridiculous. Somehow Eggman just happened to be right next to his glue factory, and so he destroyed it when his drill machine crashed into it. I had no idea they were that close to it. But I guess it does make sense because Sonic started his adventure because he was warned about Eggman making something. So he would naturally go in the direction of the glue factory to investigate. But of course I'm left with the question of, how did Eggman survive this? He has to be a lifelike android. There's no other way he could have not only survived all of this slapstick explosion stuff, but also been able to change his body shape just by going in a giant egg. No normal human would be like that, and the black and red eyes are the most obvious proof that something's up. And the story ends with Sonic making another pun. The reason this pun stuff sucks is because it never feels natural that they make those puns in universe. I'm glad this wasn't a story about an original character named Sticky like I thought. I probably thought that because STC always tends to have the name of the main character of a story there in its title, and I saw main character names, and the Sticky story had none. I liked the story. It was pretty brilliant, reimagining the spring from the game as a trap. Ooh, Sonic's Diary! I have to try to curb my excitement here because I realize that this is a mere precursor to STC, where Sonic doesn't have his unique douche personality yet. You can tell because he's nice to Tails, which is totally out of character for early Fleetway Sonic. So I'm willing to bet this diary will be a disappointment and will just be bland, typical, and telling us a day in the life of Sonic where he liberates people from badniks. And all he does is say he wants to save the world. This kind of story would be equally pointless later on though, because it's easy to assume how Sonic's feeling. We already know how he feels about people in a situation. And that's what thought bubbles are for. It's even worse than I thought because it seems they made the story just to give the artists a break. Because it's literally just text boxes with no actual art illustrating it. Compare this to the Sally miniseries that I thought of right away, where it starts out with a text box of a diary entry, and yet we still see the whole story illustrated. Sonic just talks about freeing badniks. That's it. That's like a game purist interpretation of how his diary would be. Like the average Joe on the street would think that about Sonic. On Monday, he said that he was told Eggman would come visit him tomorrow. The next day, he explains that he jumped on Eggman's head when Eggman was in the Eggmobile, and he hid behind a tree. And just like that, Eggman already left. Imagine how pathetic that kind of boss fight would be. Just one hit and that's it. And this kind of action-y slapstick thing had no excuse not to be drawn. I can think of an early Archie story that was also made just to give the artist a break, presumably, and it's the one where Sonic met Alan and Cal. The reason I say this is because the backgrounds in the Alan and Cal dimension was so abstract and lazy, and it certainly didn't help for keeping you invested. But that's better to look at than this. I feel like I'm reading a fanfiction. For once, I mean that in the least insulting way possible because the actual story is good, just not the presentation. On Wednesday, Sonic tells us the Eggman attacked with the sound machine that knocks you down, but it didn't matter because Sonic was faster than sound, which I never liked the idea of before reading Archie, but fine. It does make sense that even in the games he's faster than that because he has the boost. And its blur effect around him implies a sonic boom, except not shattering glass everywhere making a lot of noise somehow. With like every day being another day where Sonic effortlessly wins against Eggman, it honestly feels like a fanfiction written by Sonic himself, where Sonic's glorifying himself as always winning while Eggman's a pathetic loser. That's gotta be how the reboot is because it has a mandate where Sonic has to always win, and even if he loses one issue, he has to succeed in the very next issue. But that kind of plot formula literally does feel to me like fanfiction by Sonic himself because it's so easy for Sonic with no victories for Eggman. And the fact that it's just text like a diary only makes the fanfiction complaint a lot more obvious. I genuinely don't feel like I can trust Sonic on this because while it is in character for him to actually succeed this much, it could just as easily all be made up fiction glorifying himself because I'm not seeing it. This is why it's actually good and important that Robotnik gets portrayed as a polluting nature, and even being a tyrant. Because that way he has some legitimacy because he's won a whole bunch and you assume he's getting genuine victories every day. So Sonic feels like the underdog rising up against him and his major impact on the world, as opposed to just him being a loser who tries to kill him and fails every time. Which is so humiliating to the main villain of the series that it's obvious that role doesn't suit him. I was confused at first at Sonic saying, "Good job, I did." It's charming that he seems to call Eggman a different insult every time and not just stick to one. He says that Eggman arrived at dark that Thursday, which is admirably genre savvy of him. But makes me question why he doesn't become nocturnal and try to kill Sonic every night when Sonic's sleeping. But then Sonic would just stay up all night too after being woken up from the first attempt on his life, which of course would not be lethal immediately in the first hit, because he's the main character. Sonic says that Eggman had 2 buzz bombers with spotlights to find him in the dark. I only had an easy time figuring out it was buzz bombers that was written there because I knew what a buzz bomber was already. I forgot that in handwriting, the letter Z looks completely ridiculous. Honestly, I don't think it's in character for the constantly informal Sonic to write in actual handwriting. But Fleetway Sonic is a bit more formal in the speech sometimes, like he says, "What is the meaning of this?" which might be a byproduct of the fact that he's smarter than you think. Anyways, the Buzz Bombers couldn't even manage to find Sonic because they crashed into each other in the dark. I would have liked to see that. On Friday, Sonic writes that he only had an hour's sleep. This reminds me of the fact that when Sonic said he woke up earlier than before, I wondered if he was going to wake up progressively earlier throughout the story. And this gave me hope that there would be a twist later on that Sonic's writing would become more deranged from sleep deprivation, which would make Eggman look really clever for thinking to do that to him. He woke up early because Eggman's laugh woke him up, almost as if him sleeping outside where anyone can find him exposed to the elements is a bad idea. Either that or he discovered Sonic's actual home and yet didn't kill him with a knife in his sleep. Even though he became evil from absorbing all the world's evil, so he's the most evil anyone could ever be. Then Sonic expects me to believe that Eggman thought disguising himself as Tails would be a good idea. And sadly, we don't get to see the hilariously bad attempt at cosplaying as someone smaller and furrier than him. I love the line, "But he was the fattest Tails I'd ever seen." And naturally, Sonic saw right through the disguise and spin dashed at him, which somehow didn't cut through him like a spitting buzzsaw that always cuts through robots would be expected to do. And instead sent Eggman away as if he was hit with a regular ball. This is why Tails should be the one spin dashing at living beings instead, every time. Because his spin dash would have no reason to cut anything with no sharp spines. So it would literally be a ball. And again, how does Eggman survive being sent flying by Sonic's spin dash? On Saturday, Sonic writes that he didn't go to bed at all, and he hid with elastic around his waist on top of a green hill. This is surprisingly good at making Eggman seem threatening. Even though he's losing pathetically easily every time, it's surprisingly menacing of him to be genre savvy enough to make sure Sonic won't sleep so he can tire him out. Sonic explains that thanks to the elastic around his waist, he kept bouncing on Eggman's Eggmobile until he retreated all red-faced. If Sonic wanted to get some sleep, why didn't he find a safe place to hide in to sleep, instead of continuing to sleep out in the open on a hill where he could be found? You'd think he would burrow underground, or better yet, crash on someone's couch. He's being very stupid, and that's the whole reason he's getting tired. On Sunday, Sonic finally reveals that he slept all night. Sadly, this happened so early that we never got a chance to have things spiced up by his writing showing that he was sleep deprived, like him being paranoid. I guess he finally had the good sense to hide. Oh, never mind, because Sonic's friends tell him that somehow they know that Eggman was crying all night. This Eggman, who absorbed all of the world's evil? No Robotnik should cry that much. Even if it does help humanize them, and I always did want Eggman to be a deeper character. So that's why I hope Sonic Boom will address the one-dimensional villain problem specifically by its humanizing of him. I hate that Sonic says "my animal friends" though. It's way too meta. Like only a human would write him to specify that they're animals, when he lives on a planet with nothing but animals. Then Sonic writes some reminders for the next week. One of them says that he plans to get some more burgers, fries, chocolate, and cola. It helps humanize Sonic when you portray him as really liking some food other than just chili dogs. This is part of what makes him my favorite Sonic. This isn't the only time he has this quality. He also plans to buy new sneakers, naturally since he just lost his old ones to glue. And he wants to polish his spines. Wait, how can you polish spines? They're like fur, they're not made of metal. And the rest are just generic stuff for Sonic. Well, for a fanfiction, that was pretty enjoyable and interesting. You know the plot's good when you like it even when it's nothing but text in a comic book. Oh, it's a pretty cool coincidence that Casino Night Zone is where Tails wants to earn respect as a hero here, because that ends up being the first zone that he earns a huge amount of respect from. Too bad it's early Fleetway Tails, so he'll just be a comedy relief failure who messes up. Then again, it is a precursor to the comic and not the actual comic. It's pretty confusing that Casino Night Zone is portrayed just like in the game rather than being an actual casino with people in it like later on. Tails flies towards a giant pinball machine and says that if he earns 3 jackpots, he'll earn 150 rings. And he says this will give him a lot of extra energy. I love that they explain that, like that's the effect collecting rings has for Tails in this continuity. He talks about how he wants to succeed at the pinball machine by being launched by the flipper, and it makes it feel like Casino Night Zone is part of a genuine, living, breathing world that Tails actually lives in. It helps that it's not the Genesis wave or simulation, interrupting the actual world the heroes live in, and thus wrecking most of the appeal of including game levels in the comic. Because here, the game levels are part of their world, and here's how they would logically interact with them. Tails says he did it, and with no sign of Sonic, being happy about it instead of wishing Sonic was here. And that makes me even more happy that he's being portrayed as wanting to be a hero in his own right instead of being super insecure like Fleetway Tails was later on. I'm glad he's not just like this in the first panel where he talked to the audience. Tails is upset at getting 3 Sonics when he wanted to be on the adventure by himself and prove himself. And surprisingly, he actually starts sobbing, just for the story to actually end right there, much earlier than I thought it would. With Sonic breaking the 4th wall by telling Tails as if he's actually there that he can't keep him out of his stories because it's his comic. Thank goodness this Tails solo stories would go on to avert this. It's like the first story had Sonic be nice to Tails, but now the story remembers who Fleetway Sonic really is all of a sudden and had to be mean to Tails and intentionally keep him in the shadow, even though he's sobbing. Were we supposed to support this? Find this funny? I'm just disappointed at the story ending too quickly. We should have had Tails win a fight. The title of the story reminded me of Tails' Tallest Tale in Archie, where Tails was also dealing with wanting to be a hero with the same amount of respect as Sonic. And guess what? Tails won a fight in that. Even though the issue had 3 stories in it, they still gave the Tails story the amount of length it needed. Then Precious Comic Space is wasted on 4 pages of us being told about Eggman's badness in the video games, which was so boring that I didn't even bother to read the text boxes about them. Especially since the font is different and the text is smaller than usual. Then even more comic space is wasted, showing us real-life people advertising stuff for Sega. I was expecting actual stories. Sonic Live did the same kind of thing, with having real-life people in it. They even have the gall to have a page that you have to read sideways, so I had to turn the picture sideways in Microsoft Paint just for that. Shockingly, they had the gall to do it again. I didn't read any of these text blurbs. They're real-life stuff. I don't care. At least this worthless page-wasting filler meant my hands had to do less work for making the review. Especially since I've been typing this since 7:40 at night, and it's 9:15 now, and it wasn't until 10 o'clock when I had finished. So of course there's another story instead of an ending. Well, that's good normally. In Hilltop Zone, Eggman says that he's making a space rocket that plans to blast off with Sonic in it. This reminded me of how in Archie, an alternate version of Robotnik succeeded in this goal. Sonic avoids some counter-killer fire and a launched spike, as I enjoy that Hilltop Zone looks like it's supposed to be. This way it actually feels like Hilltop Zone, and not just some random dusty hill with a volcano. Sonic falls into a hole saying that someone dug it, and falls into a yellow swimming pool while somehow managing to talk underwater. That was stupid in Archie too. He reveals that rather than being what it looks like, he fell in a plastic liquid that's hardening around him. Eggman tells his badniks to grab Sonic, And surprisingly, they actually succeed in it instead of Tails coming to save him. I shouldn't have expected that at this point. He's trapped in a block, somehow still able to breathe since he hasn't suffocated yet, when he was clearly submerged in liquid before. It's annoying that Sonic keeps thinking of himself as a superhero. The comic mocks superheroes later on, for good reason. Since this Eggman is in the Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog design, that makes it clear that this comic issue takes place after Eggman transformed himself to look like that. Sonic notices that the launching rocket will be on automatic and there's no crew to supervise him, so he thinks that the heater is his only chance. It sure was convenient that 1, there even was a heater in the rocket to get rid of Sonic at all, 2, that Sonic was right next to it, and 3, that when he fell onto it to turn the heat up to extremely hot, that heat didn't kill him and instead just melted the ice cube-like plastic he was trapped in without killing him too from convection. And 4, it was dumb that there even was a setting that hot in the first place. Why would the heater even have different settings on it? I was hoping there wouldn't be a crappy Deus Ex Machina, but there was anyways. And somehow Robotnik is sobbing at the idea of losing Sonic, when this is the exact same guy who absorbed all of the world's evil. And the fact that he has this design proves it, because it proves this was released after that legal mandate. As I expected, Eggman stops crying the next panel to cheer up, making me wonder why he was crying in the first place, and he realizes that Sonic used his super speed when escaping the pod to tie a rope around his leg so he'd be sent up into space with the pod. Again, how does this not kill him? This is why it doesn't work to have Eggman be the one going after Sonic with traps himself when you're putting him through slapstick to get him comeuppance. A robot would have survived this just fine. He's right below the rocket fire. He would have burned to death. Somehow the rope cuts itself to release Eggman just to be nice to him. And again, I have to question how he survives this because he falls from space. Eggman lands on a seesaw placed by Sonic. I guess Sonic stole it from a playground and carried it here with super strength. And I'm expected to believe that Eggman put an emergency exit in a rocket designed to get rid of Sonic. Eggman's knocked out, and at that point I was just confused because he was invincible to everything before. But now all of a sudden he's knocked out by the slapstick. So why? And Sonic beats him bad next to end the story, while somehow never thinking to use his run away and get objects out of nowhere power to get some rope and a wagon to arrest him when he's unconscious right in front of him. Because I guess he just likes toying with them, so he kept him around, even though at this point, Fleetway, Eggman's taken over the world, so we should arrest him, not keep him around to keep having fun with them. Shockingly, they waste a couple of pages on reviews, and since even the Echo the Dolphin game review gave it a really positive score, I'm guessing all of these were paid for. Makes sense since they're printed on official Sonic comic of all things. They wouldn't let a negative review be here. In the next story, after a boring first page with no dialogue where Sonic avoids a flying arrow, Sonic takes a giant Burrowbot seriously, fortunately. I love that it's read to be unique. Sonic can't hurt it with his spin attack, and Eggman wastes 2 panels bragging about his giant robot. The 2 heroes fly and jump to get to some swinging platforms like in aquatic ruins, which finally clarified to me where the story takes place. At first I thought it was in Marble Garden Zone because of the flying arrows, but I was confused because of the giant log. I hate that Sonic insists on calling the giant robot Grounder when he's not that character at all. Sonic somehow thinks that jumping from a pillar and hitting the robot will damage it with the exact same spin attack that didn't make a dent the last time. And I bet it will work because Deus Ex Machina. The robot explodes way too easily, Sonic frees some badniks, and the heroes avoid the giant Pico Pico hammer from the Eggmobile. And it does kinda make sense that Eggman gave up on that in one attempt because Sonic's so fast that of course he just missed. So instead he threatens them in the water with a giant fish robot. Wait, somehow they're staying on the surface of the water, and Sonic can swim! Even though him not being able to swim was what gave him such trouble in one of the latest Sonic the Poster Bag stories where he was trapped at the bottom of the lake. More characteristically of Eggman, he doesn't wise up and stop trying to smack Sonic with the hammer, so he ends up riding his Eggmobile towards a giant fish robot with teeth. And somehow that collision makes the robot explode, and somehow Eggman survived. They then waste even more pages on a worthless quiz about the issue, which is just lazy of the writers. I didn't even bother. This issue's writing sucks. The stories were all a lot more enjoyable than last time, but come on, all the victories were way too easy again, and Eggman should not have survived all that slapstick. The writing is just lazy. But I love that they try to make use of game locations to make them feel more like they're in a genuine part of the world, and Hilltop Zone looks like how it's supposed to look for a change. For all the comic space they gave it, I'm talking over 140 images here, and that's including images that cover a lot more than just one panel. So this is more images than an Archie Sonic special takes up. Somehow they wasted so many pages of this on worthless crap instead of actual stories. That was a bad idea. The writers were really lazy to want to do that at all. And it made it feel like it really dragged out because it had more comic space than it should have had and deserved when it was just going to waste the extra space. I'd like to emphasize, I did find these stories enjoyable and I loved reviewing the issue. It's nice to go back to what Fleetway used to be, and see what the downside is of being too lighthearted before we dive into the darkest arc in the whole comic. At least when the villain is too competent, I'm interested and engaged instead of just bored because every story has Sonic win effortlessly. The writing was creative, it wasn't painfully predictable, and that's great for early Fleetway, but at the same time, they did not care about having the writing make sense.